Hi, my name is Lorena Mora-Mowry, and today we're interviewing Daniel Catán, a Mexican composer known for his operas. Mr. Catán studied philosophy and music, and he has his PhD in Princeton University. He was commissioned to do an opera in Spanish in Houston called Florencia en la Amazonas, and this opera was a complete success. Mr. Catán, how do you feel to be considered the Latin American preeminent living composer?
I'm surprised. I feel very surprised. As a composer, we spend so much time by ourselves working on a piece of paper and dreaming up sounds that, and we are so used to the fact that we are not that visible. Unlike singers or conductors, composers on the whole are very lonely creatures. That when I am aware that my work is well known or something, I am very genuinely surprised. But I'm delighted.
What was important to you to go back to rediscover your Spanish roots?
Well, I think it has been my mission, in life. I always wanted to write operas, and at a certain point, because I had lived so many years in Britain and in Europe and in the States, I assimilated the operatic tradition of the West. So at a certain point, I was on the verge of writing operas in this style, or at least in that tradition. I do respect and love that tradition very deeply, but at the same time, I wanted to reconnect with my own roots and, as it were, give birth to a tradition of opera that we do not really have in Spanish, especially in the Spanish of Latin America. For that, I realized that I had to not only write them in Spanish, but I had to use a Spanish that evoked our whole culture. Otherwise, they would sound like translated operas into Spanish, So the works of great writers like Garcia Marquez, Octavio Paz, Mario Vargas Llosa, all of these wonderful people that created a literary boom, and they made their works important the world over. They were a great inspiration to me to try and do the same thing in opera.
It's like bringing color, the Latin America color, to the opera.
Right. Now, I want to distinguish between their voices as Latin American writers, and what it might be thought of as, say, a folk Latin American writer. A writer does not have to be engaged on folk themes in order to be part of that culture. That's what tourists do. But a writer, a Latin American writer, can engage on themes that are of universal interest, but from his perspective, from a Latin American perspective, and that's what makes him Latin American. So I needed to fully understand that in order to create works that were truly Latin American, even if they were dealing with universal issues, you see? And that took me a while to understand, that I had to capture something far deeper than just the language. Of course, the language is very important, but Strauss's works continue to be German works, even if they are translated into Italian. Verdi's works are Italian, even if they are translated into Spanish. They retain that quality. That's what I wanted to create. It has not been easy because the operatic tradition is European, but I've been inspired by a number of people that have done similar things. The writers on the one hand, and also some operatic creatures. For example, Benjamin Britten. He really gave birth to a tradition that is now English opera. Before Britten, there was Purcell, but not too much, between Purcell and Britten, and he inaugurated that genre, and he was also one of my mentors and inspirations.
How you were inspired by Gabriel Garcia Marquez?
Well, Rappaccini's Daughter really is my first successful opera. I had made a few attempts before that, but that is really my first successful opera. And that libretto, I managed to combine Pass's poetry with Hawthorne's dramatic structure, and it worked very well. So when that was premiered in Mexico City the first time in '91, a lot of writers and artists went to the premiere because an opera in Spanish in Mexico had not been premiered, a new one, for years. So anyhow, they all went, and Garcia Marquez liked the opera very much, and he says, next time you write an opera, I'll help you find a libretto, because he's an opera fan, an enthusiast of, especially Italian opera, he loves. So when Houston then commissioned a new opera for me, the first person I went to knock on his door was Gabo, and said, "You are on. Now you have to help me. You suggested that, so here I am." So we started looking for a libretto for a play, for a story, and I found in the end that the best thing that I could do was to borrow the setting, which is what I did, and even some of the characters, or at least be inspired by those characters and develop a story around them. So that's what we did. The characters first started looking very much like Gabo's characters, out of his books, but slowly they started detaching themselves and demanding their own stories, and we let them do that, because that's as it should be, right? So now they look like cousins or something like that, the family relatives of Garcia Marquez's stories.
So what are your impressions of Cincinnati compared to other cities that you have your operas being performed?
Well, each city is really very different, and each one takes the opera in its own particular way. At first, the opera was being directed towards the Hispanic community, and I think that was right, in one sense, but in fact the opera has proved to be very popular amongst the whole operatic community. It has gone much further than the Hispanic community. In fact, where it broke all records was not in Los Angeles, where it's the biggest Hispanic community, but in Seattle, that has the smallest one. So that was fascinating, and in Seattle, everybody knew about the opera during that time. Now Cincinnati is a little more like Seattle. The Hispanic community is not as big as in Texas or in California, but the community is incredibly musical and operatic. So I'm really looking forward to it. There seems to be a buzz in town and an excitement that I'm delighted to feel.
Well, this buzz in town is because we know it's a beautiful opera, and it's been a successful Houston opera for, I think they repeat it every year, something like that. And Seattle, and now in Bogota too.
Right.
And Los Angeles, so finally,
Yeah.
it's in Cincinnati.
Yeah, well, but Cincinnati has been treating me so wonderfully. It's a wonderful opera company. It's incredibly professional. They've engaged a fantastic cast. This is a new cast, by the way. I think we're in our third or fourth set of casts. And I'm delighted by that, because more singers know the roles, and there are more choices, and the opera and the roles slowly are getting to be known by themselves. I love it when a singer puts in his resume that he did Riolobo or he did Florencia and does not mention the writer, just like they do Rodolfo and they don't mention that it comes from Bohème or Puccini. They just, the role that itself becomes a living role. I love that when it happens, and that's beginning to happen with the new generation of singers, and that brings me a great deal of happiness.
Thank you, Mr. Catán. Thank you to Spunky, John Production, Marcelina Robledo, escapelatino.com, and don't forget to call the Cincinnati Opera at 241-2742 or visit cincinnatiopera.org. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time in our new interview. Thanks.